Metabolic Syndrome Workshop. I want to thank Dr. Lance for making this possible and exposing you to this this information. You know, the results and test results that you had done can cost as much as $700 in a laboratory. And so Dr. Lance has made it available so that it doesn't have to go to that measure for you to find out some very important numbers that are key markers for the risk of metabolic syndrome. Now, not everybody knows what metabolic syndrome is, and so what we're going to do through this presentation is just talk a little bit about it. My name is Jason Whitney. I represent the company that makes the products and represents this for the doctors, for him to then treat his patients. And so we're up in Salt Lake City. We're a Utah company. We are not multi-level, so don't worry, we're not going to try and sun anybody up by the end of the evening. However, a downline would be nice, right? But we just call that referrals for Dr. Lance. So what we're going to go over is these three areas. What metabolic syndrome is, how you get it, or how you got it, what your numbers are, okay, and what they mean, and then why the WHEO program, that's how we pronounce it, WHEO, and it stands for Wait is Over, kind of clever, how it can work for you. I had someone when we were starting the company, they came up and said, you know, did you notice that's kind of clever, because wait is over kind of has double meaning, wait. That's a great idea. Thank you for pointing that out to us. So it has a double entendre on it. So metabolic syndrome. According to the World Health Organization, 79% of all Americans are now overweight. 80%. That's a tremendous increase. 18% increase in the last 10 years. For the first time in the history of the world, 20% of the population are overweight and 15% are hungry. Can't the group get together and share? And then, you know, I don't know. Maybe there's an opportunity there. By the year 2015, which is only what, less than a year and a half away, if you all the people that are overweight, you add them up, it'll be more than the population of China, Europe, and the U.S. combined. Scientists are actually a little concerned that that added weight is going to take the world and spin it off its axis, and we're going to spin out into outer space. So there's going to be a redeployment program where some of us might have to go live in different parts of the world just to balance out the world. So watch for stuff in your mail.
Cancun. I call Cancun.
The average American has these health risks. 31% have high blood pressure. That's 1 in 3 adults. 22% don't even know that they have it. For high cholesterol, 27% have it. 25% have never even been tested for high cholesterol. In the category of diabetes, almost 11% of Americans have it. And if you're over 60 years old, a quarter have diabetes. 33% of our children right now will be a diabetic by the time they're an adult. And then some more information on diabetes that's kind of interesting. Technology, just waiting for that. There's over 6 million people walking around right now that are diabetics and they don't know it. They have the symptoms and they're wondering why they don't feel quite the same. And oftentimes it's the diabetes issue. One that you haven't heard a lot about is fatty liver. 75% of those who are overweight have a fatty liver. And those that are skinny, they visually look thin, up to 32% of them have a fatty liver. We call them skinny fat people. Now I know none of you woke up this morning and you looked in the mirror, you know, before you put your clothes on and go, ooh, man, I gotta lose some weight on my liver. Okay? It's just, you don't really see the inner organs, right? But metabolic syndrome is actually the first step, the first clue to metabolic syndrome. That's the first area that you know that you have fatty liver. Your liver's not supposed to have more than 5% fat, and if your liver is fat, then several things start to happen. The liver does more than just cleanse the body. We're going to talk about that, but it also is the fat burning mechanism in your body, okay? Diets. Now you women know diets a lot more than us men do. However, what's sad to me is that a study was done both in England and the United States and found that the average woman will spend a total of 31 years of her life on a diet. Isn't that sad? It's not because there's something wrong with them. Part of it's just our society and what we've kind of conditioned what women should do and what they have to do to fall in line with our expectations. And men are not far along, 28 years. That's almost 300 diets in her lifetime. And another sad report is 66% women report that they don't like their body. And that's another sad report. One that's scary is that how old are children when they're in first and third grade? What ages? 7 to 9, right? Right in that age group?
Yeah.
42% of those girls think that they need to be thinner. They're just little girls. And where are they getting that information from, right? We as a society are conditioning them to think that they're too fat already.
I don't want to interrupt your smooth speech here, though, but in Salt Lake City, there's a huge billboard of a young woman. She can't be more than about 17 on breast augmentation. And she's, I mean, she's tiny.
I've seen it.
You've seen that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just horrible. I just cringe every time I drive by it.
And so we definitely have underlying, expectations that we have, and diet's got to be one of the leading ones. Interesting news is that 35% of the people that go on diets progress to be pathological dieters. Now, we all know what a pathological liar is, right? Well, that's just a dieter that just can't stop dieting. It just continues to diet. So, the CDC has reported and connected that 62% of all the deaths that occur in the United States are directly linked to the cause of metabolic syndrome. Now, what's interesting to know is that over 80% of the population has metabolic syndrome. That's a large percentage of us. That's most of us in this room have at least one of the symptoms of metabolic syndrome, and it's grown at an epidemic rate. I'm going to introduce you to the members of the metabolic syndrome. Now, you can kind of see here you got 4 scary-looking characters. Not to be blamed for being a sexist, we do have a woman in there. Okay, the rest are dudes. All right. So the first, what they are is you have high blood pressure over there on the left, then followed up by high cholesterol, high glucose or diabetes, and excess fat. The mist in the background, okay, that's fatty liver. That's the 5th member of the qualifying for metabolic syndrome. How big of an issue is it? If over 80% of the population have at least one of the symptoms, I want to really have you wrap your mind around how big of an issue this is. It kills over 1.5 million people every year. So let's associate that to the number. If you take every soldier that has died since the very first civil or revolutionary war up to our present war, that totals just over 1 million people over 200 years. That's how many people die every year from metabolic syndrome. In other words, one dies every 3 minutes. Oh, let me rephrase that. 3 people die every minute from metabolic syndrome. What I want to stress upon you is that it's completely, absolutely preventable. It doesn't have to be that way. It's not something that was just handed down to you from grandma and grandpa and you can't do anything about it. But metabolic syndrome, those scary folks that are on the screen there, they have friends. We call those associative symptoms. One of them is cancer. And so nearly all cancers are associated to the risk of weight, of being overweight. For example, just being 20 pounds over your ideal weight, meaning if a woman gains 18 pounds in a span of 20 years, it increases her risk for breast cancer by twice as much. Just that much, okay? Diabetes. Those that have diabetes, only an increase in their weight from 8 or 11 to 18 pounds doubles their risk of type 2 diabetes by 200%, okay? Increases it tremendously. Next, high blood pressure. those with high blood pressure are 200% more common in a person that's just 30 pounds overweight. That's not a lot of weight. I mean, sometimes that's as much as I'm carrying around in pocket change. Well, I like to go to the videos. Of course, are there any videos or?
No, dude, that's in the 80s, man.
Arcade, I mean, wow, I'm showing my age. Those that are overweight, every 2 pounds of extra weight over your ideal poundage increases your chance of arthritis by 13%. Another 2 pounds, you increase it by another 13%. Every pound is multiplied by 9 times on your knee joint. So if you gain 1 pound, your knee's actually feeling 9 pounds of extra weight. That's how much extra stress it takes on our joints. And what's interesting, one parent that's overweight increases the chance of a child of that family being obese. Not only overweight, but obese by 80%. That's a big deal. Carries some important responsibility along with it. So what causes metabolic syndrome? What's really the cause? If it's not heredity, if I'm not getting it passed down, if it's not a disease I caught somewhere on a handle or a doorknob, how then did I get it? And that's what we're going to talk about. Science has identified that it's caused by something called hyperinsulinemia. Who has had children? Okay, so mothers, what was one of the rules that you had to really drum into us fathers' head, because we want to always make the kids happy and quiet them down when they're yelling and screaming? You never give them sugar after a certain time of day, right? Or they are what? Hyper. You'll never get them to bed, right? And so that's very much of what hyperinsulinemia means. It just means that your pancreas is in hyper mode. It's secreting, putting out too much, more insulin than your body was designed to handle. And so what happens is that there's results. Our organs respond to this powerful hormone. There's 2 master hormones in our body. One of them is insulin, the other one is glucagon. Most all of you have heard insulin, right? Glucagon is its night cousin, right? It's yin, it's yang, the opposite. It does exactly the opposite of what insulin does. There are no hormones in the body that are more powerful than insulin and glucagon. Every biological and metabolic function that's done in the body is influenced by insulin or glucagon. And what controls those hormones is what you're eating. And if you're producing too much insulin, you're getting too much of one. It's like having too much day and too much night. It's like having, I could go on all day. So what causes that? What causes too much insulin? Well, studies, over 600 clinical studies over the last 50 years. So this isn't something that we just dreamt up and said, you know what, we've just cracked the code. Science just hasn't known about this. We've known about this for half a century. It's just that it hasn't been available in a very convenient fashion, one that we could really live with in a convenient way. And like I mentioned earlier, it's completely and totally preventable and reversible. So the simple test that we had done, these are the test results that you had, and we're going to associate those to the risk level that you're in. So, what is that? Who recognizes what that is? What do we call that?
Food pyramid.
The food pyramid. Okay, so we have this down here. That means we're supposed to eat more of this, right? We're supposed to get more of our calories in our diet from the bigger part than the smaller part. So we're going to do a little history. We're going to go through the history of the pyramid of food. I know that's what you've always wanted to have outlined. And so you can talk about it with your friends instead of going to a movie or playing a game. You can talk about this because this is cool. Too many of us have this as our food pyramid, right? We have this down here as the basis, and then we top it off with mad munching of chocolate bars. So in 1958 was the first introduction of the food pyramid, and that's what it looked like. Those who are in school, it might look a little familiar. The nation, those that were overweight, were 32% by population. Okay? We're going to go through these changes because this is when the USDA and the FDA made changes to our food pyramid as far as recommendation. So let's go to the next one. That's what your food pyramid looks like today. This is the newest change. Okay, so we've gotten away from the food pyramid, now we call it My Plate. So, we're traveling through time. In 1958, there wasn't a recommendation of how many calories you should get from carbohydrates. They just said, eat a balanced diet of these items and associate it to servings. In 78, they made the change where it was actually the pyramid. They recommended that the amount of your total caloric intake in a day, how much of it should be from carbohydrates, was 25 to 30%. They changed it 10 years later, increased it to 35 to 40%. 92, they went to 45. Kind of freaked me out.
Yeah, sorry guys.
Okay. And then 65, and then now we're at over 65% of your calories are supposed to, according to this recommendation, come from carbohydrates. So let's see what kind of impact that had on other reports from the CDC. So we're going to go to this. In 1958, 32% of our population were overweight. In year 2010, 79% were overweight. Kind of a different number there, right? It definitely went up. During the same period of time, those that were obese increased 322%. So this increase from 32 to 79 is a 247%. Go ahead and show the little hourglass next. Yeah, see that nice little graphic there. So there's kind of a correlating relationship here. They're almost the same. Our carbohydrate increase was 260. The weight was in 250. Wow. Is that an underlying story? Is that telling us a secret code there? If you compare the other issues of heart attack, diabetes, heart disease, they all are similar numbers of increase. So what we're saying here is the studies are quite clear is that this kind of a diet, and even if we cut this out and go with grandma's whole bread, we don't have sugar at all, we still have those same health issues if we have a high consumption of carbohydrates in our diet, like 60-65%. It's too high, because what your pancreas is doing is putting out too much insulin in a 24-hour clock, not giving glucagon the chance to come in and do its cleanup. So, the reason why we eat that yummy food is simply just because it makes us happy, doesn't it? I mean, we love it. We love carbohydrates. And so that's why it's so hard to say no. This is not a conversation about the fact that carbohydrates are evil. They're not bad. It's just like kissing. Who doesn't like a good kiss, right? It's just that kissing when we're driving, it can cause some problems, right? And you talk to your husband and said, honey, I want you to show a little more love. I want you to kiss me a little more often. So you're in there in the shower and he pokes his head in there and gives you a kiss. And then you're doing your hair and you're putting on your makeup. And then you're putting on your shoes and he's just, oh, honey, this is killing me, right? Okay, enough with the kissing. Too much of a good thing doesn't mean it's the best thing. And carbohydrates definitely fall in that category. They're not evil, it's just that too much of a good thing can cause us harm. So, we just need to lower it because it can make us sick. The average American consumes now, and this is a line because this study was done in the year 2000. As of year 2010, it increased from 322 grams of carbohydrates a day to 402, and it's still going higher. We're just waiting for the new numbers to come out. It's going out of control. The secret really isn't in calories. It's how much are you getting of each macronutrient. How many carbs versus fat and protein are you getting? It's not really the calorie count. So this isn't a program about counting your calories, weighing your food, or even counting carbohydrates. Because the truth is that we get bored of doing that and we'll stop doing it anyway. So, sugars, and I talked a little bit about that earlier, that if you completely cut sugar out of your diet, you will still get, on average, 2.25, 2.25 cups of the equivalent of eating white sugar. In another way, if you ate nothing but healthy, recommendation of the food chart of whole grain foods that they're saying 60-65%, It's the equivalent of eating nothing but 2¼ cups of pure white sugar every day. Because you see what happens is that if your body takes a whole grain and it takes white sugar and it breaks it down into glucose, the body doesn't care. It cannot distinguish the difference whether it came from whole wheat or white sugar or fructose or high fructose corn syrup. It doesn't matter. After it's converted to glucose, it's the same, and the body gets the same response. So, those yummy foods, and those sometimes yummy but naughty foods, have this kind of effect on our bodies. So I don't want you to glass over and think that you're going back into a biological lesson and Dr. Lance is trying to, have you be doctors. I'm just going to give you a short little lesson of what happens. When you eat a carbohydrate, your pancreas secretes insulin as soon as glucose hits the bloodstream. Because you eat a carbohydrate, breaks it down into glucose. Glucose is our body's energy source, and we got to get that to the cells. But the cell doesn't have the ability to absorb glucose without insulin. Insulin is called an insulin receptor, and then you have your glucose channel in every cell. Let's just change that language. Garage door opener, garage door. And so when glucose comes along, if just because you pull up your garage door, unless you have that garage door opener, it's not going to open up. It just can't absorb through the cellular wall. And so once it introduces itself, then the glucose comes in. Once glucose comes in, then you have energy. Then the cell does its special thing. That's where we get all that energy so we can go about and do our business. Okay? So what happens when you go and you put gas in your car? I know everyone's done this at least once. And especially if the gas drops in price a little bit, and so you want to squeeze every bit out and so until it raises back up. So you're keep on pulling that trigger. What's that called? You're pulling the trigger. You're trying to top off the tank, right? And if you keep on doing that enough, what's going to happen to the gas?
It's going to spill out.
Yeah, it's going to spill out. Why? Because the tank is designed only to hold so much gasoline. Your cells are no different. It's designed to only hold so much glucose, right? So if you eat all this glucose, 400 grams in a day, and your body says, I can't use 400 grams. I don't have a tank that big. So that means that you got glucose floating around in your bloodstream with no place to go. But because our bodies are very cool, it wastes nothing. That extra glucose has a magic trick. It changes from glucose to what? You missed my dramatic. Okay, so I haven't worked in a circus, and I don't have this, everything done yet. Okay, I'm not going to be a magic man, obviously. So that's where fat comes from with glucose. So sometimes you look at the label and go, oh my gosh, this is great. There's no fat in this food. I'm going to eat it, and I'm going to eat a lot. Because I can't get fat if I don't eat fat. Most of the fat that we get added to our body is not from fat. It comes from unused or over surplus supply of glucose because we're eating too many carbohydrates. Okay? And that's what happens. Now it's a great tool because your body says, I know what's going to happen. They only need to top off the tank once. It's once in a blue moon. But what happens the next day? Well, the gas prices were lower, so we topped off again. And so it took the excess and stored that as fat. And then we top off again because it's my sister's wedding. And then we top off again because, well, who's going to say no to eclairs? Okay? And my husband just bought me some chocolates, and no one's looking. And so I'm going to have this cookie. And in fact, I'm going to have 3. And, it just keeps on going, and we add up, right? So the problem is that it's not just the fat. What happens is your pancreas, your liver, your digestion are working overtime to trying to handle this misbalance. Well, each one has its own set of problems that come about. Where are those problems? Well, we kind of talked about them. Heart disease, right? We start having arthritis issues. We start feeling our joints are a little sore and we get up in the morning. How many times now you get up in the morning and you kind of step on your feet and you're like, oh, the bottom of my feet are kind of tender. And they kind of take a little while to get warmed up, right? Well, that's not because you're getting older. It's because of this. And that can be overcome in a really short period of time. And that's the good news about just giving your body what it needs to be successful in overcoming these issues. So, we covered about the pancreas. That was the pancreas section. We're going to talk about 3 metabolic functions, because that's what this protocol really does. A lot of you may have came in here because you heard, well, this is a great weight loss diet. It's really not a weight loss program. It's a wellness program. And how we do that is by managing the pancreas. We just talked about that. The liver, because that's the fat-burning factory in our body. That wasn't the signal, sorry.
No.
And then our digestion, okay? Our little tummies and what's going on in there. So a healthy liver has 5% fat. An unhealthy one, the average person has up to 31%. That's not overweight, fatty liver. How many of you have heard about cirrhosis of the liver? Where do we get cirrhosis of the liver from?
Yeah.
Right? Did you know that the leading cause of cirrhosis of the liver now has a name? Non-alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver. Not from people that drink alcohol. Because you can get the same results by eating too many carbohydrates. And that's what happens. So you could never touch a drop and get cirrhosis of the liver. And it's called non-alcoholic, and that's the leading cause now. Wow, that's not so cool. So next, the liver does more than just filter stuff. It is the fat-burning factory. So if you don't have a liver, you won't be able to burn fat. So in our protocol, just logic, since the liver is burning the stored fats, that's the primary factory for it, shouldn't we have that baby just humming along nice and smooth? That's why in our protocol, we defat your liver. So when you look in the mirror, you'll go like, look at that, your new liver. Ooh, honey, come here, look at this. You want to touch it? Okay. Next one is digestion. It is the leading complaint. When people go to the doctor, it's the leading complaint that people have. I just don't feel good. My stomach always hurts. I got stomach aches. I don't feel like I'm digesting. I'm kind of bloaty. #1 complaint as far as health. The average American, their ability to digest food is only operating at about 47%. What does that mean? That means that you're only digesting 47% of the stuff that you're eating. The rest of it isn't even being broken down. That's not good. Which, by the way, that's one of the reasons why when you're eating, you eat a good meal, and one meal that maybe years ago you'd go like, that would have filled me up. I have to eat twice as much now. Wow. And then other times you're like going, I don't eat nearly as much as I used to eat. Right? Your digestion is just going through a roller coaster, and that's a major problem, especially when you want to try to lose weight or lower your cholesterol or blood pressure. So, over insulin production is the cause of all those issues. So, studies have found if you correct it, all those issues can be rectified. So what's the secret? What's the secret code? We've come up with this ingredient that we found in the ancient jungle of beaver. Okay, it's a jungle. It's just on the other side of the mountain. You guys probably haven't been there, and we're the only ones in the world that get it because we pay the local farmers there to build schools or something. That's often the story that you hear. That's not our story. This isn't about the product at all. It's about simply giving your body the macronutrients in the balance that we were designed to have it in. That's it. We're just giving you the right amount of protein, the right amount of carbohydrates, and the right amount of fats. And we have some cool stuff, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. So I'm not going to tell you about it, because you don't care. What you care about is, does the system work? Does science back it up? And will I be successful on it? And can I stomach it? Can I swallow it? So that's our secret. So next, resetting your pancreas. We use that term loosely. So you'll hear your coach and Dr. Lance talking about resetting it. Resetting it just means getting it back to normal, where it was supposed to be. Your pancreas is supposed to put out a certain amount of insulin. That's what we're getting it back to. And we can do that in 12 weeks. In the worst, most naughty pancreas and liver out there, we can do that in less than that period of time. So that's great news. Okay? That's how you get lifetime success. All right, let's talk about your numbers now. Okay, so pull out your little cards that you got. We're going to go through and talk about these numbers. This is where we're going to use Dr. Lance, and he's going to kind of go through and explain some of these numbers. So you'll see a guide here. You see the guide over here where you should be and below, and he's going to explain just a little bit about why those numbers are what they are. So in your head, I want you to just write your number right there. Okay? So the first one, total cholesterol. You got it.
All right. Total cholesterol is essentially a measure of all the fats in your bloodstream. And there's about 7 kinds of cholesterol. Triglycerides are kind of a cousin of type 2 cholesterol. So your total cholesterol, you guys are all used to hearing that number probably when you have your blood drawn. The 200 number is a cutoff of the high end of normal. So an average person should have a total cholesterol less than 200. Okay? There's certain numbers that are different through here based on the types of, so if you've had a heart attack, we want numbers to be different. If you're diabetic, we want them to be a certain way. That's kind of a general rule. Total cholesterol less than 200. Okay? HDL, yeah, on your paper it calls it HDL. That is essentially the good cholesterol you have, and yeah, yours is unreadable.
So just to kind of give you a highlight, if you have an NA on there, the machine that we ran here is FDA approved and tested for accuracy. It is 98.9% as accurate as going to a laboratory. The only difference between this and a lab is that their high number ability is higher than this machine, and their low number can read lower than this machine. So if you have an NA there, that means that it's so low that it can't read it, or so high that it can't read it. And you can kind of get an indication if some of your other numbers are high, then you're probably not the low number, you're probably the high number. So.
Good. So HDL is extremely important in your bloodstream because it is what grabs the bad cholesterol and gets rid of it, essentially. Okay? So it's a really important part of your cholesterol numbers. Okay? Triglycerides, like I kind of explain triglycerides as being a cousin to cholesterol simply because they go up. Triglycerides will be higher for different reasons than the cholesterol, and they'll come down with different treatments. For instance, you take Lipitor, your triglycerides are going to be very minimally affected by Lipitor, right? Most of those cholesterol medicines you've heard of will not help with this number. Okay, so it's a different fat that's a cousin.
Is that affected only by what you eat?
The majority of the triglycerides is affected by what you eat, which is fats and sugars will read. So people who drink alcohol has a ton of sugar. It breaks down to a ton of glucose. Their triglycerides are always really high. Right? If they stop drinking, they will come down. Yeah. But it can be,
So is pop a lot the same with that?
yeah, sugars, candy, lots of
Like
cookies,
diet.
all your diet. Yeah.
They do that too.
Yep.
And so how do you get that down? Just by diet?
Exercise can also
Triglycerides.
quickly drop triglycerides.
Oh, diet drinks are they're a little tricky. I know they're
One of the
pretty
major problems, if I knew research with diet drinks, is that they're finding that nearly every one of the synthetic artificial sweeteners, the king of this is called acesulfame potassium. On your can you'll see it called ACE-K. Okay? Even though it has no glucose at all, it fools the pancreas and thinks there's glucose, so you will get an insulin response even though there's no glucose there. That's even worse because now your body's going, why are you giving me insulin? There's not even any glucose here. And then you start having more and more problems with insulin resistance. New study out that if you drink 1 can of pop, diet pop, a week, it increases your chance for type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance by 300%. That's how much of an impact it has on your pancreas.
for the day. Right. Insulin resistance, insulin resistance is a is the major cause of type 2 diabetes that we have. It essentially means you have glucose floating around, your insulin gets pumped out, it can't do its job at the cell level.
So kind of picture Halloween, okay? So Halloween, right? Trick or treat. Oh, great, you get to see the first kids, what they're dressed up like, right? Yeah. Oh, little Obama there, okay. And you give them the candy and then the day's over with, right? And then the next day, trick or treat. Oh, poor little kid, just forgot the day. Well, I got some leftover candy, I'll feed him. A week later, every day, trick or treat. I'm gonna stop answering the door. I don't know what's going on. Kids nowadays are nuts, okay? 6 months later, trick or treat every day. What are you gonna do? You're going to ignore it. You're gonna become resistant. That's what happens to your cells when insulin's always there saying, hey, I got some glucose for you. And your cells just go, you always have glucose there for me. I don't need it all the time, so I start to just stop being responsive. And even though it's there, the cells just go, talk to the hand. Because I'm not opening up and absorbing you.
Okay, the only other things that are really important, LDL is the major cause of plaque buildups in your arteries that lead to heart attacks and strokes. So LDL is bad cholesterol, and it really should be less than 130, and if you are diabetic, it should be near 70, as close as you can get it to 70. And that's proven to prevent complications from the cholesterol being there, okay? Non-HDL cholesterol is essentially just all the cholesterols together except the good cholesterol. I don't know if we need to talk about the rest. We have sugar on the
Really, I mean, that can be
ratio.
kind of confusing, can it? You're
The
like
ratio
going,
is
oh
important
my
to talk
goodness, which one causes plaque again? So here's the general rule. When you're looking at your cholesterol, what's the most important number you can look at? You can remember one, and that's it right here.
Right there.
Your ratio, and he explained it very well, is if you have high HDL, HDL is kind of like the garbage truck in your body for fats and cholesterol. Meaning, if your town only had the garbage truck, and it wasn't a truck anymore, it was just somebody's backseat of their car. That's what they got hired to do. So they were running around the town, and you can only throw so many bags, and they got to run back to the landfill. Is it likely that you're not going to get your house visited every week? You're going to start to have garbage build up? Well, if you don't have enough of the garbage truck, HDL, taking that cholesterol that was unused, starting to develop plaque on the arterial wall, it picks that up by design, says, oh, you got by and didn't get broken down for energy, so I'm going to take you and shove you right back to the liver and break you down again. And that's what the HDL will do. But if you don't have enough, it has no place to go, and then the garbage plaque starts building up and it causes all kinds of cardiovascular problems. So that's the most important number. Look at your number, and I don't want you to view 4.0 going, or 3.9 going, whoo, good job, right? Because it's kind of like 4.0 is the cliff. Are you going to play right on the cliff?
I'm already on
Yeah? Right? Some of you might be doing this a little bit, right? How about if we come back off the cliff a little bit? Give ourselves a little bit of room. Let's drop that thing down to 2.5, okay? 2.0. Let's get that a little bit of room, and you'll feel it. You'll just have a better quality of life. Great explanation. The only one is the glucose levels. For those that are fasting, perfect is 75 to 85. Those that are not fasting, you want to be less than 100. Or, I mean, not fasting, below 120. Okay? So, go ahead and go to the next screen. We didn't do the cardiovascular question, but if you get started on the protocol, Dr. Lance has equipment that will tell you great data about the strength of your heart, how well your blood is flowing, your risk factor for cardiovascular factors. Nobody wants to have a stroke or heart attack or get stents and those kind of issues. Okay? That just lowers the quality of our life, changes our life, and not for the better. Okay, next. So, why does the way is over work? Because all we're doing is just giving your body what it needs. By the way, what are the things that we need? Our body needs something, but you know what? We need something. And the one thing that we need is, because let's just face it, we can talk all day long about how good or how bad cholesterol, carbohydrates would be. We just love them. They just taste so good. So, everybody has some of the food tonight? You have the bread? Did everybody try the croissants?
Yes, really.
Okay. Flaky, nice crust, okay. The cookies, everybody have a taste of that cookies? Okay, that's the food that you get to have on this protocol. If we have pulled any coup or found a special ingredient in the forest of beaver, right? This is it. We have found a way, and we consider ourselves blessed. We have made low carbohydrate foods taste like naughty carbohydrate foods. We call them dumb food, because we call our line the smart cookie. Smart cookie versus the dumb cookie. Dumb cookie has 290 calories with 40 grams of carbs. Ours that you had, less than 2. And it was 82 calories. Wow. That tastes like a diet cookie? We don't have all our foods here, so don't get worried. I'm not going to our menu. But the bread that you had the sandwiches with, dumb bread, 210 calories, 37 with less than 1 gram of carbohydrate. How many of you have had a low carbohydrate bread before? How many of you have ever moved and packed food in boxes? Don't the boxes kind of taste like those low carb breads? I mean, it's just awful, isn't it? Did that taste like that bread? Okay, you toast that, it's yummy. Have it with some eggs. Tabernacle choir angels are singing in the back. It's just good. It's just good stuff. Okay? And because of our ingredients, it's not magic, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit of science of how we make it possible. Oh, we have pizza, and we have flour tortillas, and we have pie. Apple pie is the best apple pie you've ever had. It is, and I'm not an apple pie eater. We have pumpkin pie, and we just got good stuff. All right, next. I lost my place because I got to explain to you the science, but I'm obviously not going to. I'll do that a little later. Science is basically, the way that this program works is that it says that you need to have this balance. And so the way we ruin the balance is through this. You got to get enough protein in your diet. It's not really a high protein diet. That's not the solution. The solution is you got to metabolize. So when you hear that term metabolize, what does that mean? It's just simply absorb. What's your body absorbing? Metabolizing, same thing. Okay, so if your body's not absorbing the proteins you're eating, then it doesn't matter if you're eating it, because it's just coming out on the other end. So how many of you have noticed that you're weaker since when you were in high school? Most of you, right? And it's not because you've grown older. It's because of another reason. And so, the older you get, the weaker you become, they tell us. Get used to it. This is the way of life, right? Well, that's not true. And it's nonsense. So, here's the secret. Why is muscle so important? Because muscle burns more than fat. How much? Let's take a picture of Arnold here. But muscle is directly linked to your metabolism. You've heard that word before. So, guys, when you get a truck, you've got a couple of choices. You've got that awesome 30 miles per gallon on the highway, or you've got that towing power, and I get to tow a boat or a trailer up the hill without getting out and pushing it, right? But we can't have both, can we? And so the difference is the horsepower, the engine size, right? The size of your metabolism is measured directly by how much muscle your body has. How much muscle your body has is directly linked to how much fat your body can burn. By the way, ladies, you just hate it. Why do guys lose weight faster than women? Because they have more muscle. If you had as much muscles as they did, pound for pound, you'd lose weight just as fast. So you don't have to go out and get steroids, right? But that's the reason why it's harder for you to lose weight than it was a few years ago, because you have less muscle mass, and that can be changed quickly. So, fat, 1 pound of fat in a 24-hour period, doing nothing, just sitting on the couch watching Gilligan's Island reruns, burns 17 calories, okay? Muscle, doing the same thing, burns 50 calories doing nothing. okay, just to keep it alive. That's why muscle is so important for your metabolism. So to keep that alive, you gotta have a 1/2 gram of digestible, metabolized protein a day. And that's what's not happening because you're not digesting it. Why? Because your digestion quality is half or less than it used to be. You're eating it, but you're not getting it. Make sense? That's why we work with so much with the digestion. How do we do it? Every time in our food, we're giving you digestive enzymes. So you don't have to take pills. Who loves taking them? I love them. I just dig in and just have a bowl full of pills every day. Okay? But I'm different. Most of you don't like taking pills, so that's why we put the vitamins and minerals and the fiber and all the enzymes right into the shake so that you don't have to even think about it. It's just there. There's test results that prove that we can take a fat liver and defat it in 12 weeks. That was done on a human clinical trial, and there's, I mean, it's a pretty graph. It just means that we're dropping it down below more normal levels in a period of time. Kind of cool graph, looks pretty, but that's what it means. We talked about the digestive problem being stomach issues. We solved that by just giving you digestive enzyme. Why do you have to have digestive enzyme? Didn't have to do it in earlier man or back when this valley was populated with pioneers. What's the difference? Anybody? It's how we get our food.
Processed foods.
Yeah. I mean, we're not supposed to get bananas in February or strawberries, right? They're seasonal items and we can't grow them. First off, around bananas around here. And we can't grow strawberries, but when? Yeah, late spring, right? Early summer. So what happens is, because we want them, we ship them from Ecuador during the winter months. It takes 8 to 10 weeks to get here. It's a dead food by the time it gets here. The way we get enzymes, digestive enzymes, because our body doesn't just grow them. We get them from the foods we eat because they're alive. The enzymes come along with the food. So basically what we need to digest that food is in the food we're eating. But if it's 8 to 10 weeks old and they treat it with chemicals, it's dead by the time we get it. So if you're not getting it through your food, where else are you getting it from? Nowhere. And then you can't digest it and you get stomach problems. That's why some of you can't have milk anymore because you're lactose intolerant. Clinical studies show that 93% of the people that have clinically been diagnosed as lactose intolerant are not lactose intolerant. They're enzyme deficient. Get the enzymes in, lactose problem over. But that's not just lactose, that's all these other issues. So what we've done is just, let's go back to the studies that we've known about. We've known about this forever, so let's just give ourselves stuff like enzymes. Then, let's just look at that picture for a minute. How many have heard that vitamins and minerals are just a waste of money? Because we just pee it out anyway, right? So, a study done by the USDA was one of the largest studies of its time. Took 50,000 people because they wanted to find out how many of these people that were eating food, not taking supplements, were getting 100% of their recommended vitamins and minerals daily. After the study, they found that not 1 out of 50,000 were getting their vitamins and minerals. Why? Because the reason I just told you. The processed foods, and it's so old, it's not in there anymore. And also because of over-farming. Poor farmers, to compete, they're not putting the nutrients back into the soil. So where do you think the carrots get their nutrients from? Little gnomes that inject it at night? It comes from the soil. And if it gets all pulled out, and we don't replenish it, it ain't there no more. So that study was done over 20 years ago. So it's even worse today. So that's why we give you vitamins and minerals right in your shake, because I know you're not going to take the pill anyway. And I might add that 97% of all the vitamins and minerals sold in the country are synthetic. They're not natural. You know where that comes from? Crude tar. Petroleum oil is where they make it from. You're not even getting real vitamins and minerals. But not Dr. Lance's stuff. It comes from whole food. It's the real thing. Fiber, you got to get enough in you, and we're getting it right in your shake. And it doesn't taste like a bale of hay. You won't even know what's in there. So you're going to have that fiber. We're giving it to you. So, what kind of results? Well, you can expect to lose 5 pounds for people that are a little larger, little teeny gals, a week.